a raccoon living in my roof. He's pretty cute, but he shouldn't be living in my roof.
Welcome back to Balmer's Workshop, everybody, and thanks so much for joining me here again. Today we're going to have a look at part 2 of the do-it-yourself slider build. If you haven't checked out part 1 yet, then please do. That's obviously critical to get to this point. There's a whole lot of information in there that you've missed if you haven't looked at it. I'll put a link in the description below, and I'll also include a link at the end of the video. Today we're going to tack weld this thing as you're seeing now, and we're going to then fully weld it. We're also going to fit it up to the vehicle. We're going to then send the sliders out for sandblasting, fusion bonded primer, and powder coat application, and then we're going to bring them back to the shop and get them installed on the vehicle. Thanks again so much for your subscriptions, your likes, your comments. I really appreciate all of that. But looking at my analytics on my videos, only 7% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you feel like you're getting some good information here, if you enjoy the videos, please do subscribe. It would help me immensely, and it will keep you up to date on what's happening here at Balmer's Workshop. And if you feel like you've gotten any good tips and tricks and you've put them to use, I'd love to see what you've built. So please feel free to mention that in the comments, and also you can send me pictures in an email. My email is available at my website, and the website is in the description below as well. Also, please have a look at the other builds and all the different stuff that I offer on that website. So thanks again, and without further ado, let's get started.
Okay, so the slider is all put together, tacked at least, and ready for fit up on the truck. Now normally I would do this using the hoist. I put the vehicle on the hoist, and then I put the arms under the vehicle. Well, obviously the arms are under the vehicle in order for it to be on the hoist. But then I place the sliders on the hoist arms and block them up from the arms, and I can do everything at a comfortable, excuse me, working level. However, most people don't have that option, so I figured I would go over a ground fit up. So I've just put some stands in place. The important thing here is that the stands are, reasonably far towards the back and the front, so that you can get as stable a base as possible, and that the stands sit at the correct height. So my tube here is 1 3/4 inches in diameter. I like to have a 1/2 inch gap between the pinch seam and the slider at a bare minimum. So I have positioned the tops of these stands to be at 2 1/4 inches below the pinch seam. That way I've got that 1/2 inch gap that I want. So I will go ahead and do just a quick test fit. I won't put the frame connectors or the frame standoffs in place at this point. I'm just going to put the slider itself in there, see how it fits, and tilt it so that I can get a bit of an idea of what angle I want to put it on. So what I'll do is I'll put my little digital angle finder on one of these rub rail supports rather. Excuse me. And I will tilt the slider on the vehicle to the point that I think it looks good. Note the degree of angle, and then that way I can replicate that on the bench and tack my frame supports in place. Then I'll bring it back over to the vehicle and place it on again, make sure that the frame support's all made up to the frame properly, and I know that I can weld it up that way. And the slider is mocked up in place on my stands, and it fits really nicely. I'm quite happy with it. I'll give you a view from back here. So the length of the slider is nice, and what I meant by setting back the rub rail a little more than I normally do. Normally the rub rail, rather than intersecting back here, would come up right around here, so about 1 inch further forward. But exactly as I was hoping, you get a really nice clean look where the rub rail tails in at the same point that the fender flare comes out of the vehicle, and just creates a nice clean look, I think. And then you get a similar thing back here with the kick out. I've set it at a 20-degree angle right now. You can just see that there, I think. 20 degrees, bang on. And that looks nice to me. I'll get back here so we can get kind of a better look. There you go. So that's a nice clean look, lots of clearance. The the kicker protrudes just slightly outside of the rear fender flare, which I really like, and just inside of the front fender flare, which is exactly what I had planned on. So these have worked out just how I wanted. I'm really happy with the fit up. So what I'm going to do is set these back on the bench at 20 degrees. Sorry, I should mention first, I'm going to record my frame location, my frame standoff locations in their relation to the main rail. And then I'm going to mark them so that I know exactly where to put my frame supports on the main rail for tack up. I'll tack them in place at 20 degrees on the bench, and then we'll bring the slider back over, put it in exactly the same position it's in right now, only with the standoffs attached. Confirm that it fits really well. We'll create some gussets for those standoffs, triple check it by putting it back in place again with the gussets on. Then I can weld everything up and obviously do the same with the other side. Just about to weld these frame supports to the slider now. I have the slider sitting in the upright position, or in the right side up position. Up until now on the bench it's been in the upside down position for ease of weld up and easier fit up that way. Anyway, it's sitting in the correct position now. It's got its angle finder on it. I've blocked it up just slightly on a bed plate for my press rather. And I'm sitting now at 12.2 degrees and I need 20. So I'm going to use my handy dandy little blood pressure cuff style airbag to increase that angle to 20 degrees. All right, all sorted out and ready for tacking up. The rear frame support is in place, as is the mid, although it needs to be pushed up a little bit. And the front is in place and has a magnet already in place so that we can go ahead and tack that one. And we're sitting at 20 degrees bang on. These frame standoffs are all tacked in place and we're ready to go. Worked out really well. I'm very happy with it. Let's have a look here. There's the front, middle, and rear, and you can see I've got room up top and beneath for gussets, so I will add those after lunch. And I will put together the other slider and we'll mock it up into place, and then I'll be ready for full weld up. All fit up and out in the daylight. So there you go, there's the nice clean fit up of those sliders. I have them gusseted, I'll show you that in just a second. But there you are. Let's have a look at that line, dead in line with the rocker. 20 degree kick up angle. Rub rail sits just inside of the front fender. Kick out sits just outside of the rear fender for the exact fit up that I was wanting. You can see the fit up there, and you can see that I have gusseted not only the bottoms, come on focus, but also the tops of these guys. The reason why there's holes in my outboard gussets is because that way when the sliders go to powder coat, they can be hung by those holes. If they were hung by the sliders themselves, then obviously there would be spots on the sliders that wouldn't get sprayed. So this gives us our best possible method for hanging the sliders and getting them sprayed completely. But there you go, everything's all tacked together. They are ready for full weld up, and that's the next step. So let's get on with it. It's install day for the blue Jeep. We got some sliders back from powder coat ready to go on this thing, and we're going to weld them on this morning. Therefore, I have disconnected the negative battery cable already, and I have marked my locations roughly where I want my frame standoffs to go. So now I'm going to put the vehicle on the hoist and clean those spots up with a sanding disc and get ready for weld up. When I built these sliders and when I fit them up to the vehicle, as you'll have seen earlier in this video, I did it all on the floor just to kind of demonstrate that you don't need a hoist to do all this sort of stuff. However, for the weld up, I am going to use my hoist. I could of course do it on the floor on a creeper, no big deal doing it that way, but it's not a lot of fun. And since I have the hoist and I've paid for the hoist, I'm going to use the hoist. So let's put it up on the hoist in a minute and get our sliders positioned after we've cleaned the frame, of course, and weld it up. Stay tuned. So slider is in place, frame is cleared of paint, and I am pretty well ready for weld up. You can see the gussets match up quite nicely. My middle one is just a little bit low, so I'm going to wind up cutting that back just a little bit, but I've got good fit up everywhere else, and pretty well ready to go ahead with welding. The sliders are tacked in place. Both sides are done, but they are not fully welded yet. I want to just double check everything on the ground here before I fully weld. So what I have done, I've double checked it. Here, let me grab my calipers. So I always check my main rail clearance with a set of inside calipers, and by inside calipers I don't mean ones you can only use indoors and not outdoors. They measure an inside dimension, which is, as you can see here, instead of an outside dimension. So what I do is I go between the pinch seam and the main rail, and I just check that I'm bang on there, and that is just touching. We'll go to the back of the slider, again at the pinch rail, and again just touching. And the other side is absolutely identical with the caliper set at the same dimension, so we know that that's perfect. Now what I want to do is check the rub rail distance from the body of the vehicle. So I have taken a square and marked a little arrow on it where it meets at the front of the slider when I put the square up against the body. So there's the square up against a nice square body. Bring it down, and the top of the tube touches exactly where that arrow is. So now I'll check it in several other locations. We'll go to the middle of the door there, and it is bang on. Come around the hoist post, and we'll go to the furthest back point of the rub rail, and again, absolutely dead on. So we know that's nice and square, and now we'll just go over to this side and check the other slider. So, exactly perfect. Middle, bang on, and the front of the slider, dead on again. So there you are, nice and square, they fit well, and we're ready for weld up. So I'll put this vehicle back up on the hoist, weld them fully, and give it a little paint job after that, and call it a day. sliders are fully welded and ready for priming and painting. There's your welds, gusseted top and bottom, 3 places per side. I have already primed this side with some gray primer, and I will finish it up with some black paint. Very often I use Euro rock guard for this, but only if the frame has been coated with an undercoat or a rock guard previously. In this case, it's just paint, so we are going to do black paint over top of it. So prime and paint coming right up, and then time for the customer to come pick up his vehicle. All right, it's a wrap on the blue JKU. Sliders are fully installed, primed and painted. I should say the welds are primed and painted. The sliders themselves are, of course, powder coated and also coated with a fusion bonded primer prior to powder coat to ensure a long-lasting rust-resistant finish. Sorry about the wind noise that I'm sure you're probably getting. It is a blustery day here in BC, but there she is. Not my bumper. I think that's, I don't want to say, it might be a Smitty built. It looks Smitty built-ish to me, but I really shouldn't say that because I don't know. But it certainly isn't my bumper, but these are my sliders. So there you go, the Balmer Fab standard duty sliders with the Venom rear kickout. Weld-on installation this time to save the customer a couple of bucks and to give a very, very solid fit. He went with weld-on not only to save himself a couple of bucks, but because this vehicle is out of warranty anyway, so no issue that way. And he doesn't plan on wanting to swap these over to another vehicle, so this is going to work for him. But I think they suit it quite nicely. They're different than what you would normally see on a Jeep. Very often Jeep rock sliders are actually body mounted, and when they're not, when they're frame mounted, they generally don't come out nearly as far as mine. Usually what you have is a rub rail that sits really tight up against the rocker here, and the reason for that is to give yourself the best possible trail clearance, and I totally understand that, but that was not the focus for this one. These sliders are meant to both protect the body of the vehicle quite thoroughly and act as a step for both the owner and his wife. And they should do that real well. Nice rear kick out there to give an extra step up to the rear roof area if needed, and also of course to clear the vehicle away from obstacles. And unlike most sliders, which I just explained, that for Jeeps, these provide you with a really large step area. I'll put my foot up there as an example. So lots of room for a foot to be planted up there, and for roof access and so forth, and yet also to provide good trail protection and still decent clearance. I mean, let's be honest, if you look at the layout of this slider, the rear kick out does kick out just further than the rear fender, which is what you want so you don't destroy your fender, and the rub rail sits just inside of the front fender, and the reason for that is for a nice clean look. But it still offers you a good 4.5 inches of clearance between the outside of that rub rail and the doors of the vehicle. So, you know, it's a ton of body protection, and again, it kicks the rear of the vehicle out enough that hopefully that rear fender would clear any obstacle as well. Super solid mount up, double gusseted top and bottom. The tube we used is 120 wall, 1 3/4 inch round tube, and it is gusseted with 3/16 gussets.
And that brings to a close part 2 of the DIY slider build. Thanks so much for joining me for it. I hope that you got some really useful information out of it. If you feel that I've left anything out, or if there's any questions unanswered, then please mention those in the comments below, and I'll do my very best to answer them for you. Also, if you have built anything based on the tips and tricks you've learned from me, I would absolutely love to hear about them in the comments, and also I'd love to see pictures of those things, so please feel free to send me pictures. My email is available on my website, and there's a link to the website in the description below, and I really hope to see you here back next time for the next video and the next build. Thanks again for joining me at Balmer's Workshop. Take care.